For nearly 4 years, the Kremlin has relied on one specific calculation to win the war in Ukraine. The strategy was to hold the line on the battlefield, allow the months to drag on, and wait for Western allies to tire of writing checks. That assumption almost paid off as Ukraine's budget dipped into the red. To maintain their current combat momentum and keep the defense sector functioning, Kyiv arrived at a recent summit with a specific request. They needed $20 billion. But instead of the fatigue the Kremlin was counting on, the international partners gathering in Brussels shifted the trajectory of the war's financing. Germany quietly circulated a proposal that effectively quadrupled Kyiv's original request. By moving toward an $80 billion commitment, the alliance signaled a move from short-term aid toward a massive industrial injection. This pivot shifts the conflict's center of gravity. The war is moving away from a question of immediate survival and toward a long-term contest of state-level budgets and factory output. This chart shows the financial architecture of that $80 billion package. Here is how it breaks down. About $32 billion comes from an already approved European Union credit mechanism, while the remaining $48 billion is built through bilateral contributions from individual nations. To understand the pressure this puts on Moscow, we have to look at the other side of the ledger. Russia's entire annual defense budget sits at roughly $110 billion. This single NATO package for Ukraine nearly matches what the Kremlin spends to supply its entire military. The underlying math is even more lopsided. Russia must fund its war from a shrinking domestic economy, while NATO draws from a collective GDP 30 times larger than Russia's. This massive European spending has also changed the role of the United States. Through the Pearl mechanism, European funds are increasingly used to buy American-made weapons. The U.S. is essentially acting as the vendor, while Europe pays the bill. Publicly, the Russian Foreign Ministry has dismissed these funding targets as political self-harm. But mathematically, the Kremlin is facing an asymmetry it cannot win. In a war of attrition, the side that can sustain this level of spending the longest holds the ultimate advantage. But those billions have to be converted into hardware quickly, and the immediate top priority is protecting the sky. With Russian missiles targeting the power grid every night, the most urgent need is million-dollar interceptors for Patriot and Iris-T batteries. This funding is designed to immediately expand those stocks and prevent a collapse of the air defense network. The secondary investment is in Ukraine's domestic ecosystem of over 450 drone manufacturers. While they are producing tens of thousands of units a month, they need capital to scale up to the point where they can strike deep into Russian logistics lines without depleting frontline supplies. Scaling this production is a race against a very specific clock. Ukrainian officials estimate they have a narrow 6 to 9 month window to lock in their current technological advantage. Currently, Ukraine uses medium-range drones to strike logistics hubs that Russia cannot yet reach in kind. But Moscow is adapting its own electronic warfare and drone technology. If Russia develops its own equivalent medium-range fleet, Ukraine's deep strike advantage will evaporate. This $80 billion package is an emergency mechanism intended to cripple Russian logistics now, before Moscow's war machine closes the technological gap. Moving from financial commitments to actual shells brings us to the physical reality of the factory floor. For decades, Europe relied on a peace dividend, shrinking its production lines and depleting reserve stocks. Today, the continent faces severe material shortages, most notably in the gunpowder required for heavy artillery. Building new capacity is a slow process. While Rheinmetall built a massive shell factory in 15 months, it won't reach its full capacity until 2027. Meanwhile, Russia is currently outputting 250,000 shells every single month. Vast sums of money can authorize production, but they cannot immediately alter the physics of manufacturing. There is a rigid, time-consuming process between signing a check and rolling a shell off the assembly line. Managing this industrial shift has forced a change in Germany's national identity. Long defined as a post-war civilian power, Berlin has now become the primary architect and leader of this military aid strategy within NATO. The funds are also driving joint production agreements. By intertwining their tech production with European partners, Ukrainian companies are becoming part of the continental defense network. This $80 billion pivot ensures that Ukraine is no longer just a recipient of aid. By embedding its defense sector into the core of the European industrial network, Kiev is becoming a permanent part of the continent's security structure.